Welcome to the January 12, 2023 meeting of the Concord Historical Commission. I'd like to call them, well, state that we do have a quorum. I adjust the names of the people who are on the quorum. It is now Ryan Hanley, Nancy Nelson, Alan Babosian, myself, Melissa Salfield, also participating as associate member, Chelsea Cataldo. So the first item on our agenda is the public hearing, a demolition review for the property located at 900 Tanglewood Drive. When we do a demolition review, we determine whether or not the property is historically significant, whether it should be determined preferably preserved, or we allow a demolition to go forward. So I'm not sure who is speaking of the folks on the Zoom call who will be presenting the case for your request to demolish the property. You want to speak up? Raise your hand.
Sure, Madam Chair. Paul Haverty. I'm an attorney with Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty, and Silverstein in Concord, Massachusetts. I'm here tonight on behalf of my partner, Jonathan Silverstein, and also on behalf of the property owner located at 900 Tanglewood Drive. So we're seeking approval from the Historical Commission to waive its demolition delay and allow the immediate demolition of the structure located at 900 Tanglewood Drive. With me tonight are Christopher Whalen and Mickey Benson from GP Schaefer Architect, and also Jim Youngblood and AJ Proyer from Youngblood Builders Incorporated. The teams from JP Schaefer Architect and Youngblood Builders will provide the commission the details on the proposed work, including explanations on why demolition is necessary and identification on what important architectural features can be preserved and reintroduced into the proposed new structure. So our team has reviewed the staff report on the historical significance of the existing structure, and it has always been the intent of the property owner and its team to faithfully preserve and or recreate the significant elements of the existing structure to the greatest extent feasible. This commitment includes an intent to preserve and reuse certain historically significant elements of the existing structure. As the commission is aware, demolition delay gives the commission the opportunity to work with the property owner to preserve significant historical features of structures by allowing a 1-year delay on the demolition of the structures deemed historically significant. As noted in section 3.5 of Concord's demolition delay bylaw, once the year delay is waived or expired, the applicant shall have 2 years from the date of the expiration of the delay in which to act upon a demolition permit. And we hope that we can avoid that process and show you that we're going to actually preserve the significant elements in a manner that is going to satisfy the commission. So on behalf of the property owner, we respectfully request that the commission either issue a determination that the structure is not preferably preserved, or if it chooses to issue a determination that the structure is preferably preserved, that it do so with a condition that it may be demolished so long as the elements identified by our team are preserved and incorporated into the new structure. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Christopher Whalen of GP Schaefer Architect to go into great detail the architecturally significant elements that have been identified and which are proposed to be preserved and which elements are unfortunately not able to be preserved. So Chris, can you go now?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. And will I have the ability to share my screen, or do I need to request permission?
I should be able to allow you to do that. Let me do that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You should be able to share now.
Great. So I'm going to be sharing while you hear my voice. Can everybody see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Looks like some drawings in a picture. Wonderful. So good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Whalen, and on behalf of GP Schaefer Architect and our gracious clients, we're happy to submit this proposed restoration of Tanglewood House. For GPSA, Tanglewood really has always been a project with two goals. The first being, the most practical one, focusing on the needs of our clients, and the second goal being to restore and recreate as faithfully as possible the massing, character, and the details of the original turn-of-the-century house. And I submit to this commission that the latter goal has been smartly achieved in the handling of the historic core, glimpses of which we see here in the picture are drawing architectural elevation drawing to the left, and then a picture of the existing condition here to the right. Indeed, we truly believe that Tanglewood is an excellent example of a 3-story federal revival house and is something we've wanted to preserve from the very outset of our involvement in the project. I think as illustrated in the documentation submitted to this commission, I think it's evident that GPSA has a profound respect and love of old homes like this, and that you will recognize our qualifications to undertake a project such as this. We've worked on dozens of historic houses and structures across the country, ranging from historically significant estates to humble 18th century timber frame barns. We collaborate with exceptional artisans and craft people to create handmade homes with, true historic authenticity and homes that we think will continue to endure. I mean, really what I'm trying to say is that this kind of work, traditional American architecture, is vocational work for folks like my colleagues and me. So as Paul noted, there are a number of features of Tanglewood that we are planning to either refurbish or remake in kind. And I would submit that these features have been handled with great care. I'm going to talk just briefly about a couple of them for you. So first, as we can see, we have matched exactly the massing, so this kind of central core massing, hipped roof shape, the size, the siding, and the height of the original 1890s core of the house, while adding secondary but sympathetic additions to the north, west, and east. Some of that we can see here and above. And all of these new additions were added in such a way as to not overpower or detract from the original and existing core of the house, both in their smaller scale and their architectural detailing. And just to note, these additions are necessary, in many ways to accommodate the transition in the site topography, which is quite dramatic from the front of the rear to the house. A glimpse of that we can see here on this east elevation. Also, I think it's important to note that we've maintained the exact disposition and size of several original rooms, including the first floor living room, stair hall, powder room, and dining room. And this is by no means insignificant, I think, because these original rooms and then the central stair corridor really determine the layout of the windows and doors on the north, west, and south facades. And the layout of these windows is kind of a unique and recognizable feature of the original house. We also plan, and I'm going to use my mouse here to highlight, but we also plan to restore the essence of the original building's 2-story porte-cochere with the new open columned entry porch with appropriate federal revival detailing, columns, balustrades, and moldings. And also to note, I'm going to zoom in on the picture here, but we have salvaged and will continue to salvage the best sections of the existing wood coining, the stuff we see here on the side, the cornice and its modillion brackets, the running trim, and we're going to infill with new custom handmade wood profiles as needed on the reconstructed facade. And the house would be clad in new wood clapboards, and all windows and doors would be made of mahogany. And at GPSA, we take real special pride in our replication of historic molding profiles. And we're skilled at working with this turn of the century type detailing. I'm going to flip around to the back of the house real quick and focus here. The house has kind of 2 fronts, which is always a challenge, but kind of an interesting thing about this house. But we plan to salvage and then replicate the 3rd floor stair hall Palladian window, which I'm circling here with my mouse. And the surround with a new custom mahogany window unit, new custom handmade solid wood trim to really match the original design exactly. We're going to match it exactly. And then we're also proposing to create a new surround for this north facing 1st floor entry door in a manner authentic to other federal revival homes of the period. And also in keeping with scale of this existing entry. Really, we're maintaining the character, the original character, and I guess architectural composition back here of this north facade with our kind of single window centered above a porticoed entry with these 2 smaller windows flanking. And then finally, and I'll pan up here. And finally, like the original house, all the chimneys will be made of brick. We'll clad in brick, and then the foundation walls and foundation veneer would be made of regionally appropriate solid fieldstone veneer, just like the original. So in closing, we have a real deep appreciation for this house and its history. And a successful project for us will be, as it is with all of our projects, to construct a historically authentic home that respects and then replicates the original. And we want it to last for another, 125 years or more. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up to members of the commission. My first question is, you're salvaging items, are you destroying the whole, are you taking it all the way down? Or are you selectively demolishing the house? Like
So,
leaving
Madam
a
Chair,
wall?
I think that question is probably best answered in the presentation from Jim Youngblood and AJ Proya. They're actually going to get into those issues.
Okay.
Hi,
So-
folks. I'm Jim Youngblood, Youngblood Builders. I apologize for not providing a CV like GP Schaefer provided in the packet that went to you. So I will, if you'll indulge, I'll just give you a quick CV. So I've been doing restoration and construction for over 35 years. I've worked on a number of significant projects, from the Emily Dickinson homestead in Amherst. I restored the Charles Jocelyn house in Woodside, California, that was originally built by Bernard Maybach. And locally over the last 12 or can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Over the last 12 or 13 years.
We
know
are
Maybach.
familiar what you're talking about.
Okay, and over the last 12 or 13 years, my company here in the Boston area has done a number of significant projects. Foremost among them is the Isabella Stewart Gardner summer home in Brookline. And if you look at my website, in fact, you'll see that the lion's share of our projects are not out of the ground built, but rather the restoration or refurbishment or reproduction of antique houses. So why am I here applying for a demolition? So that's what I'm going to hope to tell you guys as succinctly as possible. So there's a couple of things that went on as we looked at this project for GP Schaefer. The first was, as when we first looked at it, we assumed it would perhaps be able to be done in our normal strike zone, which is we would work with however deteriorated an existing frame and foundation, and we would figure out a way to make things work, right? So as we were selected for the project and then began our pre-construction process, the first thing we noticed in the means and methods, and AJ, would you possibly be able to put up the photos that were presented? So the first thing we noticed, yeah, that's fine. Sure. Okay. And just, you can kind of scroll around these shots, but the first thing we noticed was that the proper way to do this house was obviously going to be to remove the remaining finishes. There are two containers on the job site right now full of different architectural features from the outside of this house, from the inside of this house, that have been taken down, cataloged, and stored for reproduction or refurbishment. And as we looked at this, we realized that the remaining portion of the few remaining, the siding, the coining, and as you know, Christopher pointed out, the entablature around the top and things like that, the window trim, would also need to be removed if we were going to replace this in the highest quality, best way possible. That's to say, with updated sheathing underneath it all and a rain screen construction to keep the new features away from the envelope of the building and keep the paint lasting for decades. So So in any event, what I realized was we are going to be left with a plywood box. And the plywood box is the sort of the pivot point here. So my team surveyed the building. And as you may or may not know, some years ago, a permit was issued for work on this with another architect and another contractor. And that's why what's left of the existing house is what you see there, just that small center section. But we surveyed every wall, every stud, and every floor, and found that the construction of the house was pretty radically out of plumb, level, and square, which is not going to be the end product in the GP Schaefer house. Everything will be flawless, perfect to the 16th or 32nd of an inch. And what that would require would be an elaborate case of stud by stud demolition and reconstruction. So in effect, what we would be doing is taking that house apart section by section and putting it back together section by section to achieve the level of architecture that's been drawn and given to us by this architecture firm. So this plywood box would be replaced, rather than as a whole, it would be replaced section by section until everything was plumb, level, and square in the house. So we're left with a plywood box now that if I can have AJ show you some photos of the inside, you know, maybe some of the, you know, like maybe around the page 30 or 42, where there's just some pictures. So as you can see, the house inside is not the historic house that's described, but rather a construct that's sitting there. That's sort of the idea of that historic house, but that historic house isn't there. So my orientation, again, if you look at my website, you'll see my orientation is to work around an existing structure and preserve it first and foremost. And we began to see through this process that we weren't actually preserving the house at this point that's there. We were preserving the idea and a whole lot of 5-year-old lumber. And finally, the client's plan and the architect's plan outlines and the landscape architect's plan outlines a sort of forward-thinking heating and cooling system that uses geothermal, and the need for site work underneath. And if you could scan to what's in the basement of that house right now on page 15, there is a few brick columns left, and then there's a bunch of granite ledge that's been sprayed over. Let's go back to that shot. There's a bunch of granite ledge that's been sprayed over with shotcrete.
I thought it was.
and then insulated over. And all of this to make way for a heating and cooling system that's an energy efficient system, but that it relies on indoor mechanicals, right? So there will be no outdoor mechanicals on this site. The entire footprint of the basement has got to be removed and brought down well below current subgrade, which is a large sort of drilling and possibly even blasting operation to do so.
And the wells will be the 3 wells will be on the outside somewhere on the property as well, right?
The wells will be outside, but all of the heat pumps will be inside the envelope of the house.
Right.
So the limitations of the current footprint were sort of the final straw for me to go and sort of change my vote and advocate for this structure to go away in lieu of more of a new structure. And the idea that we are going to be putting this thing back in the fashion that Christopher presented, for me was, it was great to think about doing it with the structure that's there, but ultimately we couldn't see a way that was a structure that necessarily warranted saving it.
But my eyesight's not the best, but are those pre-engineered trusses or are those 12 bys?
Probably right there, what you're seeing is a 12 by, but no, he's pointing the other direction, right?
Yeah.
He's pointing that direction? Left to right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks like a 12 by.
Okay, and
then-
the trusses, are they pre-engineered or is it real wood?
So some of the stuff is real wood, and then to the right, like in the picture, you can see that go back. The right side of the picture, you can see that's new, all new framing and engineered.
And there is a number of, excuse me, there's a number of sister LVLs to that rough sawnwood as well.
Yeah, most of the lumber in the house has engineered lumber or dimensional lumber sistered to it.
I'm hearing it.
Oh, no.
So so that was the thing that led us to the conclusion that it was more advantageous to the final quality of the build to remove the structure rather than pick it apart and put it back together a stud at a time.
Thank you. Is there another gentleman who's going to speak, or can we open it up to the commission for questions?
I think we're ready to accept questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. Questions?
Is it going to remain a single family dwelling?
Yes,
It is. It is the owner's current home and future home. Yes, the owner lived there as a child.
So I had a question. What kind of condition was the interior of the house in when you first bought it and became involved with it?
So I think, so again, this house has been in the owner's family long before any of the people who are attending this meeting were here. So when we first became involved, it was in exactly the condition that you guys saw.
So you don't know how they were able to do the work that they did. I think it was like in 2014, 15. They gutted the interior, right?
It was, yeah, it was all, we've seen the drawings. It was all, we've seen the permit drawings from the town of Concord. It was all permitted from the town of Concord.
So that at that time they were just gutting the inside. They didn't demolish anything.
They did demolish the 1940s section of the house. There's a 1940s addition.
Yeah, but it's not the exterior. Okay. I'm
Yes,
just trying to
yeah, that's
understand.
those we've done no work at all. So
Right.
yeah.
So what we see is what you have, you documented it, and this is the condition that you found it in, and now you're going to
Correct.
turn it into a silver.
Yeah, correct. Including, like, probably you saw when you guys did your site walk, some new foundation walls that were to be part of the approved plan that are just floating out there in space that are going to be demolished and are not part of the ostensible plan here. So those were all part of the approved 2014-15 set of drawings.
Yeah, just related to that, I appreciate the efforts that you've made to keep, I think you mentioned that there were 2 containers worth of material currently on site that's been removed for cataloging. So I take it that I think Christopher mentioned that there were some of the wooden coins. That's all exterior, correct? Not interior fabric then that's in there. And did we see, or do you have a catalog of that information of what's in there so far? Is that available for, or?
We just have some photos because, again, it predates us and we inherited it. We've got some great photos of a big collage of woodwork material that's been in there, but again, we haven't touched a nail on this house, so no, we have no catalog.
I'm very curious, are you going to salvage some of the, oh, there's an awful lot of lumber in there.
And that was my question. Are you gonna take some of those 12 bys out and plane them?
For sure.
De-nail them and plane them up and use them again?
Yeah, for sure. Whether it's on this site or we have some other historic stuff that we're doing, and those are very tempting. Yeah.
Well, because some of those boards have to be 200 years old. Right? And
Well,
those-
the house isn't that old, the house is 18.
No, the house is not old, so. But certainly there's some true dimensional lumber in there, some actual 2x material and some good large beams that would have been from, the early part of the last century or even the late part of the previous, so.
Well, other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Or-
please do. Yeah, you aren't official, but you will be shortly.
I'm a new member. I just don't know the background. What happened to the exterior components? Who removed those? Because the building doesn't look anything like it does from pictures of the old house. Garden.
Yeah, that would have been the previous builder per the approved set of plans that we were mentioning previously.
And would they have needed permission from this commission to do that and they didn't get it, or what's the?
Well, according
Not
to
a
what they're
permit.
saying and what my understanding, they had permission to do what they did. I wasn't a part of it. None of us here were,
It's
and nor
not-
was Anne.
Not a total demolition.
Yeah,
And it was,
So-
our
Sorry.
rule only kicks in if it's the entire building.
Okay.
yeah, it was at the time, it was deemed by right.
Mhm.
So I
Well,
have spoken to the previous architect and the previous builder just to get as much color on this as I can, and certainly that was my leadoff question.
Yeah,
And
well, again, they could do that because they didn't take the whole thing down. Then they didn't need to come to the historical commission.
correct.
Correct.
It's not in historic district.
No, yeah, so they wouldn't have to go to the HDC. Well, any other questions?
Just terminology. I know you guys have worked on an impressive number of historic houses. But I notice your terminology in terms of preserving, restoring, and reconstructing doesn't really match up with secretary standards. So I think what you're doing is really rehabilitation. Because there's not much left to preserve. And you're restoring maybe bits and pieces of woodwork or trim or things like that, right? So, and then you're adding a lot and new garages and new platforms. So it's really rehabilitation, right?
There's very little left to rehabilitate, as you saw from the pictures. As far as the percentage of what there's
Yeah,
nothing
I agree.
inside and there's very little outside. So I'm not sure of the terms either.
No,
Some of it-
I agree with you on that, but
Yeah.
in that case, it's just a new house. Yeah, basically.
It's a new
Basic.
house, but you are maintaining, you are going to reuse elements that you preserved, selected elements that are worth preserving. Obviously, you're not gonna.
Yeah. I mean, if for no other reason, then it's beautiful old material and of great value to not have to make it brand new.
Yeah.
So for instance, if we go to take all those coins down and they're in lovely shape, then of course we would strip them and keep them. And if they're in terrible shape, then we will keep the best example and make knives to reproduce them so they look exactly like those coins. Just to pick just one thing out of a hat.
Any other questions? I mean, speaking for myself, I don't see the point of imposing a delay on this property. It's,
What about the documentation? Do you have any other documentation from before the house was demolished on the inside? Or the exterior? Or the gardens or anything?
yeah, so typically what we would ask for, if you demolish it or, is to provide the plans any documentation of the historic fabric of the house. And in this case, it did, I think it had a nice landscape, but I'm not sure. Certainly,
One time, lovely.
and any interior photographs that would have indicated what it looked like, because we have no concept of what it possibly looked like.
Architectural drawings. Have you
You
seen
know,
any of those?
and our planner here did a very wonderful history of it, but we would ask from you if you could do a more in-depth architectural drawings, photography, anything you could find what the interior once looked like. And then that goes on deposit at the special collections of the library, so that we can document what was lost in Concord. I know that you would be building a new building, but the old one's gone, will be gone.
Paul, can you speak to that? Because of course, that's an order of condition that we'd be happy to.
I think you just did, Jim. Yeah, we would certainly be happy to accept that as a condition, that it's not preferably preserved. And obviously, we can do it to the extent that that information, remains available.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I believe that it's been in the same family for some time. I would hope that they have some photographs that they would be willing to duplicate and share. Again, this would be going to the files at special collections.
Sure.
If any of the photographs, and certainly the plans, he may well have the original drawings. Sometimes, in these old homes, they were left.
By their house.
Yeah, it's a very famous home here in Concord. The other one that was up in Fairhaven Hill was the one that burned down,
Yeah.
which was a tragedy, and now we're losing this one. Although by the looks of it, it's in tough shape. Yeah, so that would be the condition that I would propose.
Well, is it a condition, or do we find it preferably preserved and then suggest that if they come back with the documentation, we can discuss it and shorten the demolition delay period? That's what we've done in the past.
Although I don't
I don't know how,
I don't know that
that's what we've done. before.
yeah, we have. Although I mean, in this case, the house is so.
There's nothing left to it.
No, I
there's no
know, but
use
we
to it.
don't have any idea if there's any documentation. We haven't really looked for that yet. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we could, I guess, how about if, you come back if you can investigate what you can find, and pull that together. It may not be due in February 9th, but if you could report to Anne, actually,
That's good.
within a month, what you have found, then I think we would say go.
Then you can pursue that, hopefully expeditiously, but you're gonna be busy.
Yeah,
Also.
a lot of prep work, but
With-
I
with
think
the
you can
house.
understand, what we want, which is a documentation of the house, the interior, the exterior, the grounds, to the extent you have it, drawings, photographs. We do have a history of the Williams sisters who built it. But if there's anything more you could find, we would appreciate that. And that would be,
I think you need to vote for a continuance in order,
Yeah.
so that they don't need to do another legal.
yeah, you wouldn't have
ad
to,
and all
yes. So,
That's what it is.
Right.
so can I have a motion from someone that we would like to continue this deliberation till February 9th? And in the meantime, ask the petitioners, I don't know the right term, to research the possible documentation you can provide. And I'm sure you'll be able to find a fair amount. So, do you have a motion?
Well, so move.
I second.
Well, you haven't made the motion. I can't make
He
it.
said so,
So move.
Alan said so
Is
moved.
is that adequate?
Yes.
With the Robert Rules of Order?
Technically, you're supposed to reinstate it.
Oh, boy.
Continue to continue.
We've gotten smart because our Zoom.
I make the motion that we continue until all the information is given to the office, so we can expedite the demolition.
Till the
To February.
February.
February 9th.
February 9th.
Is that's fair.
Yeah, we'll move very quickly. You
okay.
should have it within a week or two at the
Okay,
top. At the
okay.
most.
Thank you very
That
much.
would
I
be delicious.
look forward to seeing the house. I mean, like, because your work.
We need to finalize the vote.
Oh, whoops, all in favor.
Someone needs to second, didn't have the second.
But
Yeah,
I already
she's second.
seconded.
There's a second, all in favor. So Alan,
I,
aye, Nancy,
I,
Ryan,
Aye.
Melissa, aye. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Have a good night.
We're really serious people, but procedure escapes me. Thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
all.
Thank you
Okay,
guys.
good night. Yeah, I do. I think the Zoom meetings, I lost my marbles with the Zoom meetings. So, Mr. Hewitt, hello. So
Good
we're
evening.
moving on to number 2. The application for the Simon Brown House, 49 Liberty Street. This is Bill Hewitt, who owns the property, has submitted a lot of materials, which I hope everyone has read. I don't know that, I mean, you can just briefly describe the house, although we have the history. I think the one thing I was going to suggest, the North Bridge, the house sign that does not have enough space to put on all that you've suggested.
Right, so I understand.
A little ambitious.
He was a busy man.
Yeah, he was very impressive. It's a wonderful home. Gosh, I used to walk by it every day of my life. So do any folks have any questions about this application? I think it's quite straightforward. Anyone?
No, I too did notice that there were too many words.
Yeah,
but, but I don't know what other properties do it. I mean, it's usually the name and the date, but I don't know if there are other houses that have a profession or
Yeah, there were the example that I modeled for the application was on the website, and it had some discussion of the what that person did. So I copied it. It's obviously too long for that small sign, and I can cut that back.
who resolves that?
Well, we can talk about it. I mean, one thought is, Simon Brown, home of Simon Brown, Concord civic leader. I mean, that kind of covers a lot, but he was a former lieutenant governor. It could just be home of Simon Brown, 1934.
I'm happy to do that. I think if you're going to say anything, you'd say agricultural innovator and abolitionist. I mean,
Exactly.
he was head of the school committee in Concord, but that relative to the other stuff he did, that's not, I think, as big a deal. So.
I don't know. I actually think somehow you weave in Anne French and then Jake Highs.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's so many interesting angles of this.
Probably his broadest contribution though was agricultural reform.
I think so. I would agree with that.
Inspiration for new kinds of agriculture.
Agricultural reformer, agricultural innovator.
He was more an innovator than a reformer. In that he looked at new technologies and practices and things like that. So
I mean, that actually is quite intriguing. So if someone were to drive by and see that, they might think, I should look into.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a thought.
I forget which Wheeler it was that was so important in terms of his ventures over to Japan. And he brought that. Was it William?
William Wheeler.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm
wonder
not
if they
familiar
knew
with
each other.
the interesting thing is he published this magazine called New England Farmer
That's right. That's right.
for close to 25 years. And I've benefited from the special collections, not only to get those pictures of the place, but reading that newspaper is utterly fascinating. And he was a polymath, I think, is how I describe him in the field of agriculture, which is why I think that's probably his most.
I have to say one thing about that. I can't help it. That magazine or that publication was often referenced in one of my graduate classes.
Oh, yes. Oh.
And sections from that were read by the professor often, and the Yankee farmers just couldn't stand it when everybody started moving west. And when they hit the prairie, the soil was this deep, there were no trees, no rock. They were all going to get lazy and fat, and they weren't going to know how to do hard work. And then they landed in California. And that's really funny too.
Yep.
They just sit on their porch and watch the food fall off.
Yeah, it does. Well, so I would suggest then,
Really great.
apropos of all this, that it's, Homo Simon Brown, agrarian innovator
All right.
in 1934, and ask,
1830.
excuse me, 1834.
And civic leader.
Well, I don't even have to Google
Can we
for
say
that.
that though? I mean, it's, with the map space, that's the.
Oh, I don't,
I think,
I have no idea.
I don't know with the procedure, you have Bill Crosby does these signs, or,
I believe so. That's what
yeah, so he
email
could lay
said.
it out and see if it fits.
Okay.
Are you using, did I see the North Bridge motif? Is that gonna be the standard?
I thought so, since
You-
you can actually see the obelisk from the front porch. I thought
Yeah.
that was.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Appropriate, yeah, good.
Absolutely.
This time of year.
I think we do need to take a vote, I believe. So do I have a motion?
What are we voting?
Well,
We're not voting on the exact language.
well, we're voting on the words and however they place it. So it would be Home of Simon Brown, agrarian innovator, 1834. However you.
That
however
sounds
it
good to
lays
me. That sounds terrific.
out. So I made the motion. I just did that as chair. I just did it. So I have a
I made
second.
the motion. Oh, can you make it? I didn't think you could make it. I move that, we approve this, the sign with the language that includes, that whatever his name was.
Home of Simon Brown, agrarian
Was an agrarian innovator. I still think he did so much civically.
Oh, he did, no question.
Civic leader.
But a lot of.
If you like, we don't care.
1834. Yeah,
We don't care, right? And then the dates,
1834.
And the 1834, the Macris inventory still gives us circa 1845, but I'm sure you've done the deed research.
No, I think I may have made a typo. I would go by what's in that inventory.
Then
It's not certain. Simon didn't build it. He bought it from the history of Concord debates. There's one of two people they think built it. They're not quite sure. And they're not positive on the date, but Simon didn't build it. I'll use what's in the
So
inventory.
you want to just go by the Macris, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I do think that, I think it's important to keep circa if there's not.
Yeah,
definitive,
okay.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, so Home of Simon Brown, agrarian innovator, circa 1845.
civic leader. If
Done.
you like. Do you not
Done.
like? Does it fit?
Well, I just think that there are a lot of them are civic leaders that we haven't suggested that.
Maybe you should.
I
Anyway, I
checked
don't care.
past ones and the largest character count was 50, so. we can
Oh.
just see.
Oh, 50?
50,
Okay.
I think that's it.
No, fine.
Okay, I think we're done. Okay, if that, how's that?
That's fine.
And okay, we need a second.
Oh,
I'll second that.
all in favor, Ryan?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
I, Melissa, I. Thank you very much. We look
Thank you
forward
very
to
much. Appreciate it.
Finished product.
Well, it's a lot of mud today, I'll tell you that. But
Oh, I bet.
we're working as fast as we can, so it's fun having Jake High's caddy corner. He grew up in that house.
Yes, I know, yeah, I know.
The inside's beautiful.
Thank you so much. So we will,
Good night.
we're grateful for your interest and glad you're doing this. I'm surprised
Oh, yeah.
that the Braces, who lived there for years and years and years, never applied for
Good.
a house sign.
It was fun to do. You referenced the special collections, and I must say it was a blast to dig around in there. They were very helpful, and to find all those pictures was just a
Yeah.
tremendous accelerant of getting the plan approved at HDC. So,
Thank you.
all right,
Okay,
have a good evening.
so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Aye.
Okay.
Yeah,
So Joe,
I know.
you want to come up and, the next, item is Joe Colombo, who works for the Town Guys, has done an awful lot of work.
Having a subcommittee meeting.
Joe Colombo has done so much work for the Town Guys on researching the history of Concord and being much more inclusive. So a lot more about the role of Indigenous people of color, and incorporating them into the tour. So I am remiss because I know Anne has taken some of your tours, and I recommend everyone, when the weather gets better,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
to
More pleasant.
take, take the tours. So when talking with him and listening to what you've learned, the guides have also observed some of the historic markers around town that are not accurate. And I think it behooves the historical commission to work with the guides and Anne to correct these and propose to the town some changes. This could be something that we, as a contribution to the 250th, when we will have millions of people, or however many are going to come, but also for the people who live here and the young people that are growing up here. So that's my introduction.
Nice to meet you. I'm Joe. I didn't catch your name.
Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah.
Nancy.
Nancy. Oh, you Nancy. Yeah. That's a good idea.
Pretty
Yeah.
easy.
Thank you. I think, I mean, Nancy and I, we know each other, but I grew up in Concord, born and raised, been away. I'm back here now. And I grew up on Lexington Road, next to the little pond kitchen. Yeah, part of the American Farm.
Yeah.
The history, I was a hill history nerd. Yeah, I was a volunteer at the Wayside when I was little, and that's when I worked at house. Anyways, in this place, let's just say in this work and work in town guides and work with Robin's House and some other places, we really, like all of the United States now, working hard at making sure we're re-examining all the histories we tell to get them to be as clear as possible. So I think that what tonight I want to do is just start a conversation about how we've been trying to do better at our work. And Melissa thought that might be interesting might impact some of the work you do here and maybe be helpful to us. I think the kind of the big idea is the basic, the research and scholarship. We just know more than we did before, and we feel like our work should reflect the things that we're knowing. There's no fault or blame implied in the work we're doing right now or in the past. It's just with no more stuff, we better change sort of what we're communicating. The analogy I always think about is that we're all old enough to remember no smoking sections in restaurants and planes. And we thought, oh, okay, that's the no smoking section. We followed the rule, we followed the sign. But then we learned like they didn't really mean anything, right? So we don't have them anymore. So I sort of think of that as the analogy, like we've got some things that we know aren't true anymore, but we're still communicating them. So as Melissa said, our work really is focused right now on people of color in general. And tonight I want to talk specifically about the communicating our historic markers we're doing about Indigenous folks, Indigenous peoples as part of Concord. And if this is interesting to you and other than that, I'd be happy to come in. There's a whole other strand we can talk about African American history and African American Concordians. So
I don't want to interrupt, but when you say the markers that we're doing, I wasn't just sure what that meant.
Yeah, it means that the markers that we have in town.
Okay, with the extant markers.
Yeah, they're either on tour where you have to reference it because they're near.
Okay, so it's discussing and you see, yeah.
Or when we have lots of people that visit our town but aren't with a guide, that are on their own with the town map or wandering around, and they're doing self-miseducation. So what we try that's I guess what I meant by
okay, yeah.
with it. I think that I kind of tried to organize this in two sort of areas: the problematic areas of some of our historic signage, and then I think some of the possibilities of what we could do. And I think in terms of the problematic, the best way to think about it is many of the historic markers we have in the town related to Indigenous peoples were all pretty much posted somewhere in the 19th century, maybe earliest 20th century. So they reflect the attitudes, the values, the knowledge, and the historical sort of mindset of the 19th century and the early 20th century. And those are both often not accurate and sometimes harmful to what we know is accurate history and what we're trying to teach people. Just as a quick Concord history refresher, Indigenous people were here for 10,000 years, more or less, a continuous settlement throughout the land we now know as Concord. So 10,000 years versus our maybe 400, right? So long time, here a long time. And luckily we've had a lot of work done in Concord where we know we've got archaeological research that's been done by many people and students over here. So we know some stuff that we can be communicating to people. Just Puritan influx, 1630. There was 100 years before Puritans actually decided to try to make this a place to settle, right? Of interaction. So it's not like it was this empty, at least the way we were taught in school, sort of this empty, quiet, sleepy place that the Puritans just arrived at and went, oh, what's so empty? We should just, we should make something here. Not, that's true. It's not true. It's very busy. There's a lot of people throughout all of New England. And there's this, I have that visual. I don't know if you can show. It's kind of a neat map that we don't always see in Concord, but I think it's worth looking at. That it's the map of 1634. And I always liked it because it reminds us, basically a guy named Wood, nowhere is David Wood, I do not believe, but he kind of came out here before Concord was even Concord. And it was like a brochure that he took back to, was in England, and it was like a brochure like, hey, this is what's going on, move here, look how awesome this place is. And what's neat is you see Muscataquid is noted on the map. So there's no Concord, but Muscataquid's there. And it's a nice reminder to us that all these spots had other names. Plymouth was Foxit, Boston was Shaman, Concord was Muscataquid. So I think this is a nice kind of reminder, like, oh yeah, not an empty, vacant land, a land full of people. Without getting into the detail all about Concord founding, we know that really now almost all the towns and the localities did what many indigenous scholars call now sort of the rightful purchase deed gain. A lot of work about trying to show there's a piece of paper somewhere that made all of this legal. And that's kind of gotten into our town history as this rightful purchase. Almost every town, this book is worth reading. She's a Native American scholar. Actually, it's called Firsting and Lasting by Dean O'Brien. She talks a lot about she read basically 600 volumes of town histories in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut to look for themes. And one of it she calls is firsting, where you create a story about being the first people. And there's about replacing how you get rightful deed to the land. And there's a visual in there. It's that one, and of Black William. She uses it in her book, and it's like a night. Let's see, that one, yeah. So this is from, we have Concord official like 1800 history of Concord. Well, Lynn, almost every town has one. So this is from Lynn, Mass, and their sort of image is called they call Black William. It's where he is, the indigenous person is essentially selling the haunt to the English person. Yeah, so kind of like we have our own version of this, but you see it's very typical in all these patterns. It's some sort of giving of cloth or some little collection of tools or the right to build a town. So as you said, Concord has theirs as well, and we have the myth of Jethro's tree, where there was this tree, and Squassachum and others met under this tree, and there was this exchange of, but the historical record shows that there was no proof of any of that. It's all sort of like someone remembered, someone asked 40 years later, someone said it happened, and even our markers don't match that. So can we look at that marker that says Jethro's tree, 1930? That's not good. And if you've all, and what's interesting is this has become part of our town tours as well. Yeah, no, that's that. No,
Well,
another
this
one.
is right in the middle.
It's right in the inset, yeah.
I think it's.
Or, yeah, oh, so almost every visitor that comes to town, if you're on the town tour, gets to stop there. And we're doing a good job of saying it's really valuable, but lots of people just read it. These were all put up in 1930 throughout the state of Massachusetts for the 300th anniversary of the Bay Colony by the state. In this spot stood the ancient oak, known as Jethro's tree, which beneath its major Simon Willett and his associates bought from the Indians 6 miles of land square ordered by who? The general court. Ordered by the general court for the
The
plantation.
general
of
court
Concord.
exists.
General court was existing in Boston.
Okay, yeah, but not here.
No, not here. And so it wasn't. So I mean, it's a lot of we can unpack. There's a lot of. It's not true. None of that's true. Didn't really happen in that spot. We don't know really happened. We have another marker somewhere else in front of about right down from the Colonial Inn near where Reverend Buckley's house stood. And there's a marker there that says, "Here's the spot where this magic thing happened."
So the other thing I just realized, we have a big hoo-ha on September 12th. It's Conker's birthday.
Yeah, I didn't go there.
We can't do that
Yeah,
anymore.
well, one thing at a time.
It's gonna upset lots of people, John.
But And what I thought so interesting is when we kind of look at that black and white picture of, what's it,
Black.
Black William, it seems kind of old fashioned, like, oh yeah, well, 1930, what do they know? But we found this, I guess it was really popular in the 90s, it's called Concord and folded.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people liked it, 'cause there's some nice pictures in it, and you can scroll, but I can show you. Like, we were, as late as 1994, we're doing the same thing. We have a nice little, a lovely little watercolor of the trade of, you know, some
Oh, there's the
clothes and a
trade,
couple of
yeah.
shovels. You know, so
Funny.
it just, what it reinforces for us is that these mistellings have gotten into our sort of town narrative, and we have to work it out. Now, as a guide, we can do that, but we have lots of people that aren't guides, they just wander through town and will see these signs. So what can we do about it? That's one example of this. The other thing is called firsting. She talks a lot about in her book where during the 19th century, a lot of like signage and monuments for first. Plymouth is has a lot of trouble with it. First white person born, first time they did the wash, first Thanksgiving. Concord, we have some, a lot of the first meeting house, the first parish, first, and we have a sign like put up in 1930. Very similar. It's probably one of the more offensive signs. It's called First Settlement. And and it's
That's so.
it used to run, I guess it was somewhere on 2A. At some point it got moved. It's actually in the Wayside.
Yeah, sort of
Yeah,
in the woods.
yeah. It's up just a little to the top of that.
Oh,
Yeah, and it says, I read you the text from it. Concord Library has all the text to all of these. Yeah. No, one of it's up there.
That's totally.
Is it before
There's
this?
that acknowledges something.
Yeah, that one there. That one there.
Right.
First settlement. Westward along, westbound to the meeting house. Along the sunny slope of the ridge, the settlers of Concord built their first dwellings.
So that's somewhere along Lexington
It used to
Road?
be, and now for some point, I don't know, it got moved. It's if you park at Wayside and you walk up like you're gonna go to the Orchid House or. it's
Yeah,
there.
it's on the south
Oh, I
side
know,
of
I know.
Lexington.
I remember something.
This is
about
really
it was
offensive.
moved.
Well, just because it's, I mean, there's nothing wrong with noting where people build some homes, but this whole concept of first.
Yeah.
You know, the first, but you don't know, that reinforces there was nobody here. The
Yeah.
first settlement was when the English colonists built their homes.
Just say first English settlers.
Yeah, and there was one on 2A, which is, I don't know, it says, if you look it up, it says it's missing. It was right at the 2A Lincoln line. And it was worse.
It was the town mountain.
Yeah, sure that I see it as quite offensively as it's being described. I mean, it does say the settlers of Concord. It doesn't
No.
say the first dwellings erected in
What's
the geographic
title of
area.
it?
Fair enough. I didn't see
Yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
That's the problem. I mean, for a native person, and they tell us quite clearly, and I can send you the research behind this and who spoke about this, it's reinforcing the narrative of basically settler colonialism, that this place there was no settlement here, there was nobody here. The first settlement was when Europeans arrived. So there's ways some of these signs there's ways to re-educate, I think, on some of these. Some of these don't need to be removed, they need some re-education. Can we just look at the Egg Rock one? Yeah. An Egg Rock,
Right.
and well, this was in 1885, right? Concord went on for the 250th or something? Yeah. 1635. But they put these up all over town.
Yeah. that's-
And on the hill, this author with Indigenous Irish, talking about this is sort of the last day, like we're done, last Indigenous
And they're
person.
gone.
They're gone now. On the hill, the Shoddock, the meaning of the rivers, and along the banks lived the Indian owners of Musketaquid before the white man came.
And drove them over.
Right, so done.
And killed
Block them out.
And it's interesting when I was surprised to find Concord's reference in this book. And she says, Concord, Massachusetts surpassed the efforts of Groton and other towns in laying seven commemorative tablets in 1885. Taken together, the seven tablets tell a place and story in a multifaceted way. They're dedicated to the Indian owners of Musketaquid before the white man came in. And she goes on to list how each one in its own way was a marker about here's where our first house was, here's where people left here. So in the big picture, they have they're problematic in the kind of history they're telling, because the history they're telling is the history of the 1800s or the history maybe of 1930. And I think that the most problematic part is that's it. There's nothing else. There's no other marker or education sign, or there's nothing. You can't, no one with a guide or without a guide can go anywhere in town and say, well, yeah, I know these are old, but here's the one that accurately describes Concord, because we don't have to talk Indigenous history.
Well, the one about the mill dam where the fish weir, don't say, isn't that?
It says that there was a fish where that the
It's a little nod to.
Europeans, but you can't go and say, okay, this is the kind of homes they lived in, this is where the settlements were, these were their religious practices, these were their cultural practices. There's no sort of teaching. Luckily, the Concord Museum
I was
has
gonna say,
something,
yeah.
if you know to go and pay to get into the Concord Museum, right?
Yeah.
So there's a place to go, but there's no public like we have everywhere else.
Who does that very well? I can imagine that's a lot of signage.
Well, I
It's
think
very extensive, and I never read that stuff in museums.
there are a couple of, I think Acton does a really good job compared to Concord. Acton actually has, and I show you some pictures, actually has done, there's a trail you can go on called Trail Through Time. And in that trail through time, they mark places where there was Indigenous work and they have information.
There's wayside exhibits.
Yeah.
So they're actually
There's
physical
wayside.
things,
Yeah.
because you've talked about updating the Concord map that incorporates.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right, but there's no, so some quick, if this is a problem, these are some examples of problematic. I want to give you some examples of possibilities. Possibilities would be, to me, this is my opinion only, and maybe some others, the Jethro's tree sign and the first settlement sign, we gotta get those down. And gone, those two would be gone.
Which I think it is so that was erected by the Massachusetts State Historical Commission, I take it.
In 19.
In the-
Well, the Tricentennial is that
There have hard signs.
Well, we can
Well,
put them
actually,
in-
we have a sign.
historic New England treats those signs as
As
historic signs.
To me, this discussion
Yeah.
is reminding me of the whole discussion the country has been having over Civil War.
That's right.
So I'm an art historian, so that's very topical in museums. And the same with provenance. The Museum of Fine Arts has a new the only provenance curator in the country, because provenance is so important of ownership, and of course with all the Nazi looting, it's relevant. So to me, this is a topical subject for our time, and all of these signs, when I moved here as an art historian, I read all these signs, I've stood by that sign, Jethro's tree, so many times, and it always baffled me. I always thought, I'm not learning anything from this sign. I couldn't read it and then it would go out of my mind. So it's not a good sign anyway. And to me, these signs should be preserved. It could be an
Yeah.
exhibition.
We have
of
a-
these
we have-
templates.
we have-
This is everything that took this down. It's an educational moment. And
Yeah.
yeah.
The answer's gonna say is whatever Concord Sign Museum is
Yeah,
dedicated.
Right, I know. I've
Those
visited
could
it.
be
Yeah.
put in.
It's a teaching moment, absolutely. But
Some of the others, like I think Egg Rock, for example, people know Egg Rock,
Yeah.
that's been there forever, it's a thing. But we've got this lovely path that goes down to Egg Rock from the boat launch. And we're on the new map, we're putting that as path to Egg Rock. We could very easily along that path have a freestanding, I don't know how to swear, it, but you could put something, or when you're at the spot on the path, where you can see Egg Rock, there could be a little explanation about this was put in here in 1885. These ideas behind it, however, we do know now, and teach people a little bit about what was going on in the Indigenous area. The one in front of Buckley's house, same thing. It's a huge granite, I don't think you're gonna be digging that out anytime soon, but you could put maybe some kind of explanation around that. So there are some ways to take the ones that aren't easy to remove and make them into teaching opportunities.
I see a CPC application.
And then, can I say one of my possibilities, the most awesome spot, where there actually, we have a lot of evidence about indigenous settlement is at the, I call it the Knoll Gate, used to be Asparagus Farm, where the extent, okay. There was a lot of excavation done there in the 90s. We have two really beautiful sites that we know where they are. One was a fire pit that dates back 4,000 years ago. And the other one is what's called the Black Floor, or really it's a wetu, which is a wigwam, a home, a floor dating from 1400. And those are just two of what Shirley Blank will tell you is a very extensive amount of settlement, all from really the Knoll Gate through the Concord Castle
Where is
Hill.
this?
So where is this?
Sure, yes.
So I don't know.
Well, actually, we can tell you about these two. Yeah, these are when the
We're not supposed to share, I believe, historic archaeological sites.
And that's like.
well, I'll tell you what I know. And you can.
Yeah, I'm learning, so I just,
Okay. They,
recommend you be cautious.
when they were building the Central Cemetery, they wanted to make sure that there were some rumors like there are in this town from time to time about that's where there's an Indian indigenous burial ground. So they did investigation and they discovered that no, but they found two. And there's these articles you can find, I mean, these articles, the public, you can read about them. And we know they were marked by the town, and we know the town employees know where the marks are. So if we needed to just write about them, we know what the spots are. But where it is if you go to the extensionist.
I do know, I know where you're talking about. I know.
In the
I know.
circle.
There are state protections.
Oh, is that
for
right?
these sites.
Next to Gordon Bell.
Okay,
So it could be something as simple as maybe not showing the exact site, but that would be a place to display something to teach somebody about the indigenous residents of our town. And we know that that whole area was quite extensive, going all the way into what we used to call filter beds, what is it called now, water treatment.
oh, yeah.
Um,
Well, you know, like in Emerson is built on the big clamshell heap.
oh,
And there's-
not even- that's the second most important site. Did anyone know one at Emerson that was going in front of the sign?
I never asked. I mean, I worked for Emerson a long time, but, and I was very well aware of that,
Yeah, that's an awesome site.
but,
But I,
No.
checking here, so I think that was my thinking thing, the timeshare, but I figured we don't control that. And what was, I don't know, maybe Ann knows more, what seemed beautiful about the cemetery site is that's town property. And all the way up, that farmland, all the way up to the reformatory path is town property, I believe. And the water treatment plant is town property, I believe. So it seemed like it would be an easier place to figure out if we wanted to put some historical signage or some teaching. Oh, and the pictures I want to show you. Oh,
I mean, the thing I know Ann is very worried about, and I understand, is you don't want people going in and
Yeah.
looting, you know, desecrating
oh,
not
well,
only the
this-
cemetery, but the native
Yeah,
site.
they're not great sites, and there's really nothing there.
Would they,
We need to get advice from the state
but
archaeologist.
we do, we have to be careful with that.
Can you, can I see that last picture active? So there's going back to that trail through time, just an example. I'm not saying it's the most beautiful one, but you can take this trail and yeah, and they have some nice panels up that tell you about people who live here.
Where did you start it?
If you take the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail where it crosses, you can pick it up at a lot of places. You can pick it up, you know, where on the Friedman Rail Trail, kind of where the pencil factory is,
Yes,
kind of in there. And if you, the easiest thing to do is Google Trail to Time Active. They have wonderful maps. So just,
I thought the pencil factory thing was pretty neat,
Yeah.
because I don't know how many people ever found that. You kind of have to you have to exercise.
it's nothing too fancy, but you're walking on the trail and they've got some panels up
Yeah.
and they work with native people to make sure it's accurate. And we don't, but the thing is, we don't even have that.
Well,
Yeah,
no, but you know, I do
nowhere to
point
go.
out that Marcia and crew have done a fair amount on Concord along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in West Concord.
Yes, beautiful
Um,
stuff. And so we're good at it.
We can do it. We are capable.
And the other picture just shows you, it's the same image, it shows some people on a walk. And if you want, if you're really interested, you go for trail through sometime website, you can watch this video, they take you on the whole trail.
Oh, okay.
And during
Oh,
lockdown, they
that's
wanted to
cool.
get people out, so they took the trail for them. So I think my only point for tonight was just to start the conversation and say, there are we know more. We should reflect what we know and what we're doing, and there's things that are problematic that I think are fixable. And I think there are possibilities that you guys know better than I do, certainly how to do it. It just seems like we ought to do something, especially in light of, 2 feet coming out, and there's now, please ask me any questions or pushback or slash out any thoughts.
I have one for you, since you brought up next door.
Yeah.
The markings in the great room of the Marion House in the rafters, that you can see the paintings.
No, no.
Did you ever
No,
hear this, that Indian children were talking?
no, no,
Was
no.
that's maybe the mythology, maybe the truth, but there are these things there. They may be carved and painted, but you can see them if you're looking for them over the fireplace. And by the paneling on the left side, and these are the rafters. It's pretty cool. So I don't know the truth of that.
Well, there was a big, right after the Pequot War, and certainly after the Phillips War, there was a lot of native people that were brought in as indentured servants and schooled in Christianity and others. It's very unlikely.
Yeah.
It's very likely. Oh, I know, that was the last point I didn't mention when we talked about the egg rock idea, and they're gone. That's not true, because we have evidence of indigenous people living in the town as indentured servants and as enslaved members of the town after the Phillips War. So into the 1700s, there's clearly indigenous people as part of existing. Sorry.
Interesting.
So,
It seems this is a beginning of a conversation, because signage is a huge topic, and I know the Haywood Committee, my husband's on that, and there's a lot of history behind Haywood Meadows, and there's some signage there, and I didn't know history of it. I live right across the street from it until I read it, and there's a debate about whether some people want signs, some people don't. So it's really a town-wide discussion that needs to be held, and where are the appropriate places, and how much, because there's so much to learn about this town, so you can't have signs everywhere.
No, but I think we have to be aware of places where signs are not appropriate. And
Definitely the
And the fact
inappropriate
that-
ones need to be
And the fact that
corrected.
we have zero signage for our indigenous should give us some energy. I mean, I don't know how often you get applications to have a sign put on the house, right? And then every day.
Not as many, not.
Yeah, we wish we had that, but here, we can figure out how to do that. We have a system for that.
Mhm.
And we clearly have a system about when we want to demolish a house. We've got all these great systems. And we use the systems we have to figure out how to have some information about indigenous people. Because that's there's a beautiful history here
Yeah.
that we're not talking
I mean,
about.
I started working on the old man's issues and not very long ago, and was really surprised. Again, I haven't lived in Concord my whole life, for a long time now, and I had no idea that there were, Black people that were living with that family. And I just felt that, even enslaved, I didn't know. And it just, I thought, wow, this is so late. It's not just late,
Right.
so that's just in our recent past. So we are really catching up in so many ways everywhere.
That's right.
Um,
That's one of the joy of the last
and that's
20,
a sign of our times.
20 years of work people have been doing. I mean, it's starting to impact us now, and we've got to catch up fast. And sure, the younger generation not going to tolerate it. If we don't,
Fascinating. It's
they
so
call it out all the time. You've been to the Robbins house and seen the
Right.
bell out front. That's because high school kids said, we're not going to tolerate
That's right,
an
right.
enslaved bell at our school. So how much longer are we before when we're being told the same thing? Like, what is wrong with you, Concord? We want to bring everyone here, we want to bring 200,000 people here, and we're not going to, so you can't tell me there's not someone going to ask about, so how do you honor your indigenous people? Oh, well,
They
we can
left.
get to that. Right? Can't just be all muskets and, man, we are more than just that.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, this historic preservation plan. We just add that, the menu that those people are going to have to take on is growing. But that we will be hiring a consultant to develop a historic preservation plan for the town of Concord. This would be a part of what they have to investigate, along with, like structures that we already know, but there are more structures, landscapes, archaeology sites, and
Thank you for saying landscapes, because it's missing. from so much.
Well, I know, I mean, that's one of the big reasons that we,
And these are things that
This-
are out. in the
yeah,
land.
so, you know, you will be we don't have the money yet, and we don't have the firm yet, but got a menu.
So I heard.
Got a menu.
Yeah, well, thank you. So no,
Oh,
this is just the beginning conversation. There's baby.
So, what do you have any other questions?
Oh, actually, I'm very grateful. I heard your presentation yesterday on the historic issues coffee as well. And just to underscore two things that you said that I thought were extremely helpful. One is the salutary reminder to all of us on this commission and beyond that when we have better historical information, when we have documentable, verifiable things that we can point to that say things happen differently than we thought, it's incumbent upon us to make those revisions. That's absolutely necessary. The other thing that I was struck by, and I think is a very important, and again, salutary reminder, is the degree to which you emphasize that those signs from the 30s certainly reflected a very particular political moment. And that's true anytime the sign goes up.
That's right.
And we're in a very particular political moment as well. And so every present moment believes that it sees better than the past. And it's incumbent upon us to remember that we too will be judged for the sorts of time that we put up. And I think there has to be a great deal of humility and a great deal of thought before rushing into anything, because we're in a very complex ideological moment. And I would hate to think that we would simply want to replicate that moment in the whatever physical.
I see what you're saying, but I cannot see how they're similar at all. I mean, we're trying to rebuild and retell something that a genocide that has happened to the indigenous people of our country. And we have no evidence that we don't even talk about it in our town. I mean, we didn't even discuss the fact that we have no marker or acknowledgement at all that the town voted to remove the last 58 indigenous people to send them to Deer Island to a concentrating area. If you had a native person here, I think they would understand that, yeah, we have to be careful, but I don't think they would be tolerating any sort of like, well, we need to delay. Because this is it is an inflection moment in our country. We're trying to see if we're going to be a multiracial democracy that's going to survive throughout the 21st century. And this is the small part we can do in Concord in our small way to show that, yeah, we can do it here, I think. I mean, I'm happy to send you some of the videos from the Nipmuc people and the discussions they've had at their cultural center, cultural center on Grafton. It might be helpful. They interview the author of this book and to get some perspective, and maybe I'm sure if we wanted to bring some of those folks to town, they'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sure. We've been talking to various representatives from the tribe. We've been trying to deal with very specific issues related to sign naming here in town, and so we've been grateful for their inputs so far.
Well, I mean, I do feel like it is a contribution that we could make towards the 250. Quite seriously, I know that in the various committee meetings I've had the 250 portion that I'm associated with, that's one of the thrusts is, look, we need to be much more honest about history and inclusive. We ignore the fact that there were Blacks who fought in the war. There were Blacks who helped build the bridge. There were Native Americans who, indigenous people, I don't know. And we don't, that's some of the people on the committee, however, would just like it to be, there was a battle at the bridge and see what it spawned. Well, there's a whole lot more. And we owe it to the town.
Yeah.
I know we owe it to the country, but I think we owe it to one another here too.
Because your point's absolutely well taken. People will judge what we did in our time. I mean, we laugh when we read Louise Malfit's notes about how they wouldn't let women at the on the stage at the 1776. Like, oh, silly people, what's wrong with them? What are they going to say about us when they look at what we did in 2025? Like, oh, how about those people? They had all this information, maybe. Yeah.
Anyway, so
I'd like to have this conversation, and when you're ready, or when you feel like, so we can have the same conversation about what we're doing with African Americans in Concord, because it's not African American history as a separate. It's they're part of our story, and where we are telling it, and where we're not telling it, and places we put through some signage.
I think was it you were talking about Ellen Garrison's yesterday morning, you know, when we think of the people of Concord, the 19th century people of Concord, you think of Emerson and Thoreau and Hawthorne and the Alcott family. The Elephant Garrison story is really quite remarkable. You know, sort of the Rosa Parks of the 19th century. So, you know, if more people knew about it, then they would think of another Concordian of the 19th century. And so,
Standing with Pantheon.
yeah, yes, I like that very much. Well, thank you. So we will have you back. But it will get added to the menu for our, this plan that
If you need anything or any questions come up,
they'll probably reach out.
and we'll go away easily. So.
No, thank
I
you.
remember you had quite an archaeological site yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
The collections in the
between-
museum.
yeah, between what was in the day, the farm on Bell Road, and then we back before Knoll was the cemetery, that was a rental property, and we rented that field, and the other one that we farmed there for 30, 40 years. And yeah, it had so many artifacts. And there was this box. And then the day game, I got the box. And luckily, David Wood hooked me up with Shirley, Mikey, and she looked at the box and she said, I'll take this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then it ended up, because that's much better. It's a place where it's gonna be, it's part of that big turtle now. Makes me very happy.
It was amazing.
Wow, I love
And
that.
farmers in general
Oh, yeah.
have this experience and the mustard field over here.
Yeah.
They're always digging up, we're always digging up flints, what gets thrown
Yeah.
off flints.
Well, I
The
love that.
shreds.
I learned that they, on the morning of the battle, that they were lined up and at some point.
We should let you go, because we gotta-
On the line.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Parker's
Yes,
Revenge
so-
was a little bit like that.
So,
And the musk.
so Erin is not here. Is she here? She is here. I'm sorry, we babbled away. Which we don't want to do. So Erin Stevens, I'd asked her, so a couple of you were on this coffee yesterday. Erin, as a transportation planner for the town of Concord, will present an overview of the proposal for the Main Street and Walden Street intersection. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go ahead and share. And I apologize to everyone who's already seen this.
No, now I'll understand what I'm looking at.
All right, great. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so I'll give a sort of basic overview of what the program is and then dive right into it. So the Shared Streets and Spaces Grant Program is one that is through the state, through Mass DOT. And as you can see here, it's for a quick implementation for improvements for public safety, mobility, walkability, things like that. Last year, the project was speed management focused. So we looked at projects that might be focused on speed management and safety, and we looked at presenting those to be chosen, and we were fortunate to receive a little under $200,000 to put forth some of our proposals. It has sort of gone back and forth a couple of different times. We have come up with what we think will be a really nice improvement, both for safety as well as for aesthetics. And let's dive right in. So like I said, we're going to be looking to do some pedestrian safety. This will also help with the visibility for vehicles. Specifically, we are looking at providing bump outs that will allow people to be standing still on the sidewalk in a protected area while they're looking to see if there is a vehicle coming, and vehicles will be able to much more easily see them as well. So it improves safety for everybody. It improves the walkability of the area as well as the aesthetics. We are looking at putting in a couple of street trees, which will help with the urban heat island effect. And it also goes towards our sustainability goals, as well as stormwater management, many things. Trees do many wonderful things. And we're also only looking at removing one parking space, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So just for a little bit of context, I'm sure many of you have seen these photos before, but this is what Main and Walden looked like prior to vehicles, prior to it being paved. As you can see, we have street trees lining the streets, excuse me. And that's one of the things that we're kind of leaning back towards by adding a couple of street trees back into our landscape here. And here is another view of that. So that is looking directly at Footstock, what is the old bank, and what is now Main Streets Market. And you can see there's that lovely tree right in between. And that's kind of the same idea of what we're going for here. So this is the current view of the intersection. And this is the general proposed idea, the initial design that we came up with. So what you're looking at here is, once again, like I said, there's those bump outs that's going to provide the visibility for both pedestrians and for vehicles. You're going to get them on all different sides. The only one that you're not getting right here is because of truck access. They have to be able to make that turn, and it's unfortunately too tight and not acceptable if we bump this out. So that's the only one you won't get. But other than that, all of the other ones will be much more easy to see. We are proposing to add a patterned intersection. I'll talk a little bit more about what that will look like later. But the crosswalks will be in one pattern, and then in the middle will be slightly different. We are talking about taking out this one parking space. That is mainly because we really wanted to have these bump outs, and it seems it may be possible, but it would be much more difficult to get a car in between the two bump outs. So we thought that adding it as sort of a pedestrian or pocket park would be a really nice use of the space instead. And once again, these are those two trees that we had spoken about before. So this is not the final drawing. This has gone through many different iterations as we are learning new information the further we delve into the project. For instance, we learned that the grading, if you stand on Walden and look towards the old bank over here, the slope is it's quite great. And it would be right about here where the crosswalk would be going under the pavement if it was actually going out at a straight angle. So we have had to sort of change the way that we're going about this a little bit. And that means that we are looking to potentially put in some sort of like a granite block to sit on or something like that, sort of like what we have at the War Memorial up further up towards Monument Square. We're looking to add in some more stormwater management here to keep these from flooding. If you go there right now, it often will flood in this area. You'll get puddling, and then that will freeze over and turn to ice. So we want to help as much as possible to make sure that this area will stay clear. And we will be getting a much more pleasant experience is what we hope. So to illustrate a little bit about what the bump outs will look like, on the left is the current view when you've just stepped off of the sidewalk. You can't really see if there's vehicles coming, not until they're nearly at the crosswalk. On the right-hand side, you get the photo of where it will be with the bump out. So you would still be protected by the sidewalk when I took this photo. I was standing about 4 feet into the crosswalk though. So that's just showing you how much more visible both you will be to vehicles and you will be able to see when vehicles are coming. It will also provide a visual squeeze of the intersection, which will slow cars down as well, which is something that we're really looking to do here, is to make it so that people feel comfortable moving through the intersection, but are able to do so at a slower speed. So here's just a couple of different views so you can really see. I think this one does a really nice job of illustrating just how far down you can see on Main Street, whereas right here you can really only see past first car. And once again, here's on Walden. And then these are just a couple of mock-ups that I did. They're not exactly to scale, but they're to give you the idea. I'm a very visual person, and I know that it helps me a lot to sort of see it in 3D. So I created these to give you the general idea of what it could look like. So these are a couple of different pavement types that we were looking at. On the left is a stamped concrete. We're sort of leaning away from that right now, mainly because it takes much longer to cure. And I've gotten several different people saying that it's possibly a little bit more difficult to do than the polymer cement, which is what we're leaning towards right now. It is a very durable material from what I understand. And we were very pleased with the look of it. So these are.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but where your Zoom window is, we couldn't see the estimates of the two prices.
$10,000 a piece.
So it's 60,000 for the polymer. What is it for the stamped concrete?
About
Seven. Okay, all right.
And these are estimates that I found on similar scopes, but from different years ago. So they're estimates.
So, Aaron, are those white lines marking this crosswalk, are those literal? Or can they be smaller, or, they're very wide?
Yeah, so I think that there's different ways that you can do it. I've seen them without the white lines. I've seen them with the white lines. I think that it's dependent on how public safety feels and how engineering feels. It is certainly possible, I think, to have them without.
How about the historical commission?
It's also the color, though. You get like on the left, the gray and the red. There's such a contrast.
That perspective.
I would think the HDC would have that
I
feel.
don't know what my question is, but is that part of your decision? Is that one has a brighter color, so it's more visible and more, signal, that's the visibility is signal to the car, the traffic to slow down traffic?
Yeah, so let me show you this next photo here. So this is kind of the idea of what we're looking to do is we would do the crosswalks in like a brick pattern in more of the red so that it would be visible and people would notice that they are there more easily. Similar, like if you go to near the Concord Museum or Concord Academy, they have brick crosswalks. But the bricks I've heard, at least at Concord Museum, aren't holding up particularly well. So that's why one of the reasons that we were looking at another material. This is very long lasting, and it's ADA accessible, which is perfect. We definitely need a material that is ADA accessible. And what we're thinking about doing is having the cobblestone look in the center. So it would provide a sort of lovely, almost plaza-like feel while still being very clear where the crosswalks are. One of the things that we also like about this is that it's not slippery because it has this sort of grit to it, which is perfect for snow, ice, things like that. In fact, so this was actually in Ipswich where I took these photos in their historic district. And I spoke on the phone with them and they said that they have loved the material so much that they're actually going to be pulling up some of their brick crosswalks and are looking to put down this instead because it is wearing so much better than they expected and they really like the look of it. So I was very impressed when I went to go and see it myself. And I will note that the colors can be changed. These aren't the only colors that are available. And in fact, if you can see here, so this is the cobblestone. And we were looking at more of the cobble brick. So it has a slightly more irregular edge to it. So that it looks a little bit more organic, if you will, which we think will be a little bit more, feel a little bit more like Concord.
Could the cobbles edge the granite walkways?
I'm sorry,
Or is that too fussy?
could you say that again?
Could the cobblestone be used to edge the brick walkways instead of the white line? But you said you may not need the white line, but I'm guessing the engineers will love it.
That remains to be seen, but possibly. We were talking about using actual granite curbing as the exterior for the crosswalks. So it may be possible that we could do something like edge it with the cobbles instead. That is possibly a solution.
But you're talking about just
Flat.
clean cut granite.
Flush.
Correct.
That wouldn't be bad either, but cobbles more. Rustic. The story.
I think that's, oh, this is just a picture of what it looks like in Ipswich, and this is in Salem.
So I have a heretical question, comment, because if you're coming on up Walden Street and you want to turn left to go west onto Main Street, you don't have very good sight lines with the new bump out. Would they consider making it a no left turn?
I suppose that's a possibility. So let me go back.
It just means you turn right and you loop around the rotary,
You go around the rotary, yeah.
which isn't much out of the way, but there, you really can't.
Maybe you can, it's not different from where you are now.
Well, yeah, it is. Look, the bump out goes much farther. You're
Well,
stop back
well,
there.
that's true.
And you're looking into the Graham Nut.
But it's not a wall.
It is.
Right, so the bump out, all it's going to do, it's going to be sidewalk height, so it won't actually change your view at all. All that it will do is, our hope is that it'll actually slow cars down when they're coming through the intersection, so you might even be able to see them. You won't be able to see them sooner, but they may be going slower than they are when you're trying to take that left, so it might actually increase the safety there. Not a guarantee, but that's the idea, that's the whole, the purpose of the project is to slow people down to make it safer and more walkable. And so that is the hope, that the visual squeezing of the intersection, even though it actually doesn't change the width of the roads, but when you're going by something that is raised, it makes you slow down because you certainly don't want to pop your tire on it.
Yeah, I've already done
So I guess I don't see this proposal, a couple things. I hope the guy that designed this didn't design, I hope the guy that designed West Concord didn't design this. Because they had to do 2 iterations of that.
I thought it was 4.
Yeah, because they kept the other thing in line with that is, I don't see this as being business friendly, really, because you're not gonna be able to turn a 50-foot tractor trailer around those bump outs. And there's restaurants in town, there's clothes stores in town. And if those tractor trailers, or even a 30-foot tractor trailer, are offloading their supplies, they're gonna stop and they're gonna take one lane of traffic in order to unload their goods to whatever stores are there or restaurants are there.
Yeah, that's what they do now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've been down to Tremont Street in Boston and seen the bump outs that they just put down there. And how it's affecting the retail stores and the restaurants in Boston. I don't know if you've been to Lexington to see how they cut a couple of lanes, right-hand lanes, out of their center between Mass Ave and Waltham Street. And no one, what you're seeing is no one is visiting the center of towns anymore because of this.
Is that documented? Because Lexington just did that.
Right, and there's no one in
But
town
it's winter.
anymore.
During the day.
And it was
Yeah, during the
COVID.
day.
I don't know. I don't worry about Concord so much. I think it's a legitimate concern, but you can ask the business people if they are worried that their suppliers won't be able to make it in. I just know, my husband had his law office right there.
Yep.
For 30 years.
Mhm.
He saw so many near misses. It's a
Or even hits.
Yeah, well, there were
Yeah,
hits.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that, I really do think they have to do something. But I don't, you've raised a good question. If businesses can't be supplied.
But why
So,
can't they?
all of
Because
the,
instead, they kept the radius. for
They
the
can
trucks.
turn that way, they can turn that way. The only problem I still think with the truck would be to come and go that.
Left.
To the taking the left.
Yeah.
So all of the turns are able to be done by trucks. We've done them not only for fire trucks, but for the big sort of semis. So they can make all of these turns. That's why we had to cut this one, because we wanted to make sure that they could all do this.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I've been to the business community, I've been to the business partnership. I've been to, not the chamber yet. No, I've been to a couple of different meetings. I've met with Main Streets Market, with Footstock. I've spoken to some of the other business owners, and they're all very excited about it. So I don't think that they're concerned at all. They haven't brought up any of that. The only thing that they've brought up is snow removal and what type of trees are going to be there, because they want to make sure that the tourists like them. So I'm hopeful that it'll all go smoothly.
And if the trees don't make it, other things grow in planters.
That is also true. But we're very hopeful that the trees will make it. We have
Yeah,
plans.
this is
But
the
that's
trees
gonna
in
be
Europe,
tough.
European trees that live in, you know, they survive.
They don't have all this hardware and.
Oh, they had castor oil or whatever they used to burn in London, and they survived that. Yeah, they cleaned it up. The pollutants in European cities.
What does that have to do?
Well, castor, what is it? What is the fuel that they used to burn for the British cabs? The fumes from, anyway, that's neither here nor
But
there.
you're talking pollution now.
I
We're
am
talking
talking
about
pollution.
turning rate.
Well, I'm talking about the survival of the trees, because I think it's a really important element.
It's water.
is this gonna lead to a set of traffic lights there?
Hope
I've
not.
always wondered
Gonna
that.
lead to what?
Set of traffic lights?
Aaron says no.
Never.
Don't believe so. That's certainly not our plan.
I think
We're hoping to prevent that from happening by making it so that we're having other ways for people to slow down.
Well, any other questions? We've got to a long time now,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Because I saw that you're going to be presenting a public meeting on the 17th.
Yes, and there's a site walk on the 18th as well.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay, well, thank
I'd
you
rather
very
see a set of
much.
speed bumps there.
So
I know.
we will
They-
let you go. Thank you very much for presenting this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so moving on, we're gonna be done before 9 o'clock. But Nancy, want to do a brief update? I forwarded to everyone, I hope you saw that, the findings of new adverse events.
There's a lot to unpack in that package. There's an 8-page letter from Mass Highway, and there's a shorter letter from FHWA saying that the project as last presented at the Section 106 consulting parties meeting seems to be the one that's going to go ahead. I have asked Mass DOT, no, Federal Highways, if this determination is called a determination of effect. And stop me if I'm wrong, man. But I wrote the FHWA person to ask if there had been any changes since the Section 106 meeting. I think you were there, Kim. Were you there at that?
On the calls, yeah.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, so, that's pretty well the ball game, but there's one last thing we could do. We could ask, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation if they would take a look and review the project and advise about it. They cannot stop a project, but they can gather people together. And so if there might be consensus about asking them for a meeting or whatever it is that they do, I think it would be, we'd ask them for a meeting.
We would meet with them, or they would meet with us.
They would meet, they would, I don't know, I've never been this far down the 106 process, but I would think not just us. They were talking, I know, with the National Park as well as with Historic New England. So the person from Historic New England was the one who brought very, very strong rationale for providing the steel-backed wood guardrails. And I think that Mass DOT is rejecting
Ignore
all kinds of stuff that they could be, they put these paved shoulders 3 feet on each side of the road. Not asphalt, but it's like the material in the parking lots that's, but those parking
Jersey
lots get,
barriers.
those parking, where?
that. No,
The material.
Oh, no, packed gravel.
Okay.
Packed gravel, so it'd be like the packed gravel, stone dust, parking lots, park house, but these are roadside. These are on the road on each side of Route 2A, 3 feet on major stretches of Route
So
2A.
effectively
It would
widen the road.
it's basically widening the road. They've been putting down black gravel alongside of the road randomly, but particularly in front of Paul Revere capture site. Very dangerous. Buses stop there.
Yeah.
All the people offload, climb over the walls. And go back.
Cyclists.
So you've got these stone dust shoulders for 3 feet. You've got various widths of black gravel. The park's been trying to get them to stop doing that for a long time. And every place that there's a crosswalk, and there may be 3. I don't know what concession been made to Lincoln about a 3rd crosswalk, but those are 5 feet on each side, and then Lincoln wanted a path. So they could get from one of their neighborhood streets across to the park, and that path's 8 feet wide, so it's gonna be a lot of hardening up of Route 2A. And a most distressing thing, we found out, I was just spending too much time on a DOT website and noticed that there was a bridge project across 128 that was imminent. Basically, it's supposed to, the bids are supposed to go out, I think, in February. Nobody on the scenic byway committee presented it.
Over the road. Well, it's
Yeah,
redoing the bridge.
there's a
over
bridge right
420.
there, Route 2A, you get, keep going, you get to Lexington.
That's a new project, yeah.
And there's like 41 streetlights, there's a 10-foot wide multi-use path that goes from one side of the bridge right up to the park boundary practically. So that's a great imperative from an accommodation of the biking community, but now they hit the national park and the simple Route 2A, and
So they're
they
gonna
want-
lobby for a
they
change.
want a lot
That's what
more.
it looks like.
There are some changes that might be made at Hanscom Drive. Has anybody been up Hanscom Drive?
Every day.
Oh, my God. Every day.
Again, that's down to 1 lane now too.
Yeah.
Because they're
And then Airport Road
bringing
is,
everything in.
and the trucking is on Airport Road right
Mhm.
now, but hopefully they'll take that away. But anyway, there might be changes at Hanscom Drive as well, and those have not been disclosed. The Air Force has said Mass Highway is going to do that work, whatever it is. And Mass Highway says we don't have any plans for that, so I don't trust that. I think there must be plans.
Because the next thing you're gonna see is a bunch of buildings go up on the, over there.
On the side,
airport,
yes.
airport side.
Of Hampton
Hampton
Drive.
Drive.
Yeah, right at the end,
Yeah, that's
probably.
what's gonna
Their
happen.
new
Because they're gonna-
processing building.
Yeah, they're gonna develop where the Element is, the loft hotels. and
What that
everything,
is.
you know, yeah, that'll all be developed too.
Where? Why didn't they do that?
How do you think this is gonna work? Airport Road's gonna be opened up permanently? Because that's been expressed to me,
I think
that
so,
they
but
might,
that's,
that the base might wanna divert all their residential traffic out Airport Road, and that would be a terrible impact.
That splices the park because
This
you've got
is,
the.
yeah, this is
I know.
What is the house? That's where Dan used to live.
Whittemore House.
Whittemore House.
Parker's Revenge. Yeah, it's a
A lot of
very,
memories.
it's a very important part of the park, so, I think, the historic New England people and the park, and everybody actually agreed with the steel back wood guardrails, so I think if we could take another run at them.
So what? you-
With the help of the advisory
Yeah.
council, they might be empathetic. Interestingly enough, the new leader of, the new president of the advisory council, is she a chair or a president?
That woman, Sarah Bronis.
Sarah Bronin, yeah. actually used to work for, the firm that Dwight Merriam and, Jim Jamo worked for, so.
Have you read her resume? She's a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah,
Oh my
she's
God,
amazing.
she's quite brilliant.
She's amazing, yeah, she's really amazing. So, I don't know, we might have a friend.
Well, so anyway, Nancy, what you would like from the Historical Commission is a vote to write a letter to the Advisory Council requesting
A
a
meeting,
meeting because we are
and their review of the project.
review of the budget.
I think that's.
I make a motion,
Close to the side.
we push for a meeting.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Nancy?
I,
Brian?
Aye.
Melissa, aye. Alan,
Aye. Yeah.
Okay, so,
Did anyone second that?
oh,
I'm
Nancy
sorry.
did. Nancy did.
Oh, I did.
um,
Thank you.
okay, so we need to do that tomorrow.
I'll find out.
Well,
The
because
the
it's
State Historic Preservation Office, I think, has, I don't remember right now, if it was 30 or 60 days. It's either 30 or 60. I think it's 30 days.
it's 30.
They have 30 days to respond.
It's in her letter.
And yeah, it's 30 days. And that's fast work for them, so. And the Mass Historical, or the Chapeau seems to have a tendency to go with DOT. I mean, it's an 8-page letter. I'm sure all the Ts are crossed and the Is
But
dotted.
that's the
So
Park Service, so doesn't the Park Service take precedence over DOT?
they, no, because it's a state road
The railroads down the road.
and the part.
I thought the Park Service,
It has been discussed over and over in years past.
then why did the feds have the feds take precedent over any crime or accidents that are on that road?
They have, what's it called? It's
Concurrent
joint
jurisdiction.
concurrent jurisdiction. Concurrent, yeah, absolutely, concurrent jurisdiction. So those are individual agreements with each of the
Okay.
towns in the national park. And maybe the states,
Okay.
but that's way back.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll see. I think this is interesting because this will come up again for any project that has federal funding. And historical commissions have almost a guaranteed seat as a consulting party at the table. And the Chapeau has always been very respectful of consulting parties, and so.
Do the other contiguous towns feel the same way Concord does?
No, Lincoln is pushing for, yeah,
We are the only ones. I'm very proud of us.
yeah, and I'll say this after. after
Okay, so then we start to
It's
move
kind of
along.
fun, it's kind of fun.
I just want to, Anne should speak to this, but that Mass Historical has invited the Historical Commission to submit a full grant proposal for the
Yes.
historic preservation plan.
That's a
And that is
good
thanks to, Anne. Well,
That's a lot more work,
It's not that bad.
but you know, you've done it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that would save the town some money.
How big are the
And
grants typically, or what do they have a budget?
25,000.
Okay.
So we've asked for 50 from
Yeah.
the community preservation committee to pay for this historic
Yeah.
plan, the consultants.
Phase one.
Yeah, we're gonna come back because we want to do the whole website portal thing and new signs, and who knows what we're gonna spend a lot of money. We're gonna try to keep that covered. Anyway, so that's very good news. Then also, I would like someone to review the minutes from the November.
They do need a letter of support from the historical commission, and that's a requirement.
Oh, what,
So I
we're
don't know
supposed
if
to
you
write a
want to
letter of
vote on
support
that.
for our own grant?
Well, it's being submitted, I think, by the planning department.
Town.
Oh, okay, so
So,
do we need I'll just write something.
okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize
That's
that.
something
So,
that is needed, and their deadline is February 6th.
so I write it to Jennifer Doherty or?
I think it's Michael Chen.
Oh, okay. He's the guy who wrote to it. Yes. Okay, so then, anyway, moving on to the minutes from November 10th. Do I have any suggestions for the edits or corrections or? I think they were.
I had a couple tiny ones.
Okay.
They're just on page 3 or 4 in Mr. Capizzi paragraph. Somewhere down there it says based conversations, and it just should be based on conversation. That's great. The substantive one, again, starts Mr. Capizzi. And then I explained that CHC was invited into the process at a late date. I think 100% design, I may have said that, but it might not be wrong. So could we put a period after a late date and cross out 100%? Yeah. That would be safe. I think maybe it was the 2575. And then Commission will send a letter, Mass DOT will make. No, that's fine. And then the last sentence, if you could just spell out the advisory council for historic preservation review. We should get used to that.
Okay. Any other changes? Otherwise, as amended, do I have a motion to approve the
I
minutes?
vote that we approve the minutes of November 10th as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Ryan,
Yeah.
Nancy? Al,
Al, aye.
Melissa, aye. Thank you. So we conducted our business.
Joe left this.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
is a treasure.
It is, you
Yeah.
know, I used to have,
That should go in that box.
Yeah,
we just have to get it back to him. So I'm gonna leave it with you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I have one of these somewhere, but I got it when I was coming,
Yeah.
first coming to Concord.
Just a reminder that we are meeting next Wednesday at 3 o'clock at the Armory with
Oh,
Lieutenant
yeah.
Colonel Love.
Yeah.
I also wanted to remind you that I informed this, I think, that the Mass Historical Commission is proposing an Eastern Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition that would meet 2, 3, 4 times a year, maybe. It will be the first inaugural meeting is January 31st, 11 to 12. They have not sent the details. It's a Zoom, it's a virtual meeting. But I think it's kind of interesting because it's kind of like what our historical topics forum.
Is that an official change? Is
It's
that?
an official
Oh,
change.
okay, all right.
They're gonna want dues, no doubt.
Well, not. Anyway,
It's like the land.
that's just a little reminder. And I think that's it. I do have a little concern about the Historic Preservation Awards. So far, we've got
We have nominations. I was
None.
gonna ask, but
That's- I was gonna ask that too.
Yeah.
just debuts from,
There were 3 from 2019 or 2018.
yeah. And
No, 2020.
interestingly, Annette Bagley is working with Discover Concord to do a nice feature article about past historic preservation awards, which would come out in, I think, April. And we're scheduled. So I think we should think about pushing.
Has something gone to the Concord Bridge?
Yes, it did, and I'm going to ask you to do it again, but I've also talked to historic. HDC was where most of them came from in the past, and they all sort of nodded their head like Bill suggests. So I will email Louise and just say, would you please speak up again?
Can members of the prize committee, can we nominate people or that's probably?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
nominate someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a list of people that I think
Oh,
would be,
okay.
but I would make sure to go back and look at not just the categories, but also the criteria. Because I think we talked about whether they had to be a Concord resident, and I can't remember what the answer to that was.
No. Well, the property has to be in Concord.
Right. The work they had to
The
do.
project has to be.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think that's it. Go on our website and start the preservation awards.
Okay.
The information is all right there.
Okay, I'll submit a couple of formal,
That would be great. I'm just not aware.
No, it makes sense that you could have you're talking about contractors. And people. Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
No, it's just for the landscape, there's a landscape category as well.
But the lifetime achievement awards would probably be.
That would be Concord. And like Jane Gordon was the one who won it the last time we gave that out.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so so actually I was thinking about
we
Anne
are-
Forbes for,
I don't.
she would be
remember
such a natural choice for the lifetime achievement, but she's not a Concord resident.
Category.
Historic preservation.
Okay.
Maybe not me.
Okay, all right, okay.
We'll discuss that.
Well, well, look, lifetime achievement could be.
Yeah,
and
Jane
was primarily.
I'm sorry, yes,
Anyway, so it's all on our website. So if
Okay.
you have, anyway, but they're supposed to be due by February 28th, and if you think of anybody and encourage anybody, please do so.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is, there are 4 of us here for a picture that should include Chessie, actually technically Bob Gross.
Right,
Um,
should we push it off till next meeting?
well, we can't push it off.
Or
We can just be blank.
during the
We've
week?
been blank in the past. I think. That's
What's the picture for? What is the?
Well,
town
the
report.
town
Okay.
we do an annual report, and we've written the annual report. But usually there's a picture. I mean, some, I think, like DPW has a lot of pictures of projects and things like that, and it would just be us. So maybe we forget that. You're off the hook. No photography.
That's great.
Anyway, but it got you guys to come. So do we,
Can I make a motion, or would you like to dismiss the meeting?
you have to make a motion to do that.
What happened to the other item on the agenda, the Laurel Street?
I thought there were a couple of demolition.
Yeah, there's one other demolition review.
The one returning
Yeah.
from the last time, they already did.
No, they,
Because, they're going to post it on the Concord Village
I see,
and for
okay.
their,
Okay.
our deadline. for that.
This is the
They'll be
Prairie
here.
Street one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
They'll be
what
here.
about the scenic roads bylaws, or how's that going?
the rewriting of it, I'm relying on Ann and Elizabeth, who participated in the last meeting and took the notes from our rather inarticulate conversation. It was rough.
We'll come up with an edit.
Maybe we should just delegate to staff. It'd be easier
Oh, yeah. I mean,
on staff. It would be easier
It
on
was hard.
staff.
This one was hard. So once.
We can work on it and maybe.
I mean, there were a lot of And then-
Not tonight. Oh, I didn't. realize
Okay, so wait a minute, I'm going to call the meeting as ended.
Okay.
I thought I had to get a motion.
Everybody keeps telling me no.
Do I?
Heather always did it.
Heather was a stickler for
She's
rules
not
and
here.
stuff.
We'll stop.
So we are done.
Call it adjourned.
We're adjourned.